Look at how nice and brown that is. Maybe it will be as dry as the Gobi Desert. I don't know how dry the Gobi Desert actually is, but it's a desert, so I assume it's dry. Maybe the Gobi Desert is moist, like a chicken. Hey everyone, how's it going? We're going to roast a chicken today. In fact, we're going to slather a chicken in herby mayo, and then we're going to roast it. So if you watched the Jimmy Fallon show a couple years ago, Kevin Bacon was on it, and I just published this recipe on the New York Times for mayo slathered roast turkey, and Kevin Bacon followed that recipe for Thanksgiving and said it was the best turkey he'd ever made, and he wrote my name down on his hand so that he could remember it and tell Jimmy Fallon. So I am technically zero. I'm part of Kevin Bacon's body, which makes me 0 degrees from Kevin Bacon. Anyhow, normally I would brine this chicken first, dry brine it, in order to ensure that it stays juicy, even if you slightly overcook it. However, today I'm going to be using my friend Chris Young makes this thermometer. It's called the Combustion Inc. Predictive Thermometer. It has like a bunch of sensors down its length, so it can tell you exactly the temperature. You don't have to fish around to find the core temperature of the meat that you're cooking. You just stick it in there, and it uses an algorithm to tell you what the coldest part of the meat is. It also predicts how long it's going to take to cook based on the ambient temperature and based on how fast this temperature is increasing. So it makes it really easy to nail temperatures on things like chicken that are particularly sensitive to overcooking. So what I'm doing right now is I'm cutting out the backbone, so I'm spatchcocking the chicken. I'm using these heavy-duty poultry shears, cutting out the backbone of the chicken. These days, most butchers will do it. In fact, sometimes you can even walk into the supermarket and find already spatchcocked chickens, or butterflied chickens is the other term for it. The advantages of spatchcocking a chicken. So a chicken, when you see it in its whole state like this, and you roast it sort of the traditional way, what you find is that the breast meat is really plump. The legs are relatively thin, plus all of this is exposed to the heat of the oven, whereas the legs and thighs are sort of protected. And so what happens is that the breast meat actually cooks faster than the leg meat when you cook a chicken whole, which is a problem because chicken breast starts to dry out if it gets above like 155, 160 or so, whereas leg meat, because it has so much connective tissue, it needs to cook up to around 170, 180. So spatchcocking actually solves that problem really nicely. So you take out the backbone, you put the chicken this way, and you push it down, and so when you do it like this, now your breast meat becomes the thickest part of the chicken. All of this is really nicely exposed to the air, so what happens is that your legs will cook at the same rate as the breast. So by the time the breast hits 155, your legs will be done. So that's why I love spatchcocking. The other nice thing about spatchcocking is it gives you some chicken backbones to work with when you are making your sauce. All right, so we are now going to make our herb mayo in a cup that fits the head of a hand blender. You know, you want the head of the hand blender to just kind of barely fit in there. We're going to spoon in some mayonnaise. For chicken, I'm going to do about a half cup of mayo. Maybe half to 3/4 of a cup. And then we're going to do an herb mix. So in this mixture, we're going to do some parsley. We're going to do the old Scarborough Fair mix, the parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. This is the mix I'm using right now. You know, you can use whatever sort of herb mix you prefer, or no herbs at all. You know, just doing sort of mayo and lemon juice would be excellent. Mayo with ginger and garlic would be really delicious. The reason this works is that the mayo, you know, if you've ever made an herb butter and tried to rub it onto like a chicken or a turkey, what you find is probably what I find, which is that the herb butter looks really nice going on, and you can put on like, you know, a pound of butter and it looks really cool coating the turkey, but then as soon as you start roasting it, that butter melts and it all ends up at the bottom of your pan, so not much of the herb mixture actually stays on the turkey or the chicken relative to how much you use. The nice thing about mayo is that, well, it's viscous first of all, and it also doesn't thin out when it starts to heat up. In fact, the egg proteins in mayo are going to help it stick better to the surface of the chicken. So you end up with the herbs really staying nicely in place, so they flavor it a lot better, and you also get sort of superior browning because of those extra proteins in the mayo. All right, parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme. I'm going to go with a couple garlic cloves. We're going to do a pinch of MSG and salt. It's about a 8-to-1 mixture of MSG to salt, black pepper, and some lemon zest. I know some people say, like, when you use a microplane on a lemon, you you hold the lemon in place and you move the microplane around like that. I never understood that. I always find it much easier to plant the tip of the microplane down here, take your lemon, and just go around like that. It's a lot faster, at least for me. Maybe the other way works for you. We will get this into there. All right, now we're going to take our hand blender. Also a misnomer because I've used hand blenders a lot, and I feel like I only use them to blend hands like 10% of the time. My worst kitchen accident ever actually did involve a hand blender. I was working at a restaurant where we made a lobster bisque, and the way we made the lobster bisque is you would roast lobster shells, and then you would simmer them with a bunch of sort of aromatics, and stock, some rice. And then at the end, you would blend it all in. So we had this gigantic industrial version of these. It was like this tall. If you ever, there's an old Calvin and Hobbes where like Calvin's mother is like shoving an octopus into a pot and like a whole bunch of gross things, and then she blends it all with a giant blender. It was like that. It was powerful enough to completely obliterate lobster shells. And I was cleaning it after I used it, and I forgot to unplug it. And so I had it upside down, and I stuck my finger in the blade to get like the lodged bits of lobster shell off. And the design of this thing was that the button to turn it on was on the bottom, was on the top of it like this. So I had it on the floor, my finger inside it, and the button got depressed. And I blended my hand. And it was not pretty. All right, so we got our herb mayo. Sorry, I forgot one of the key ingredients. Scallions. This was a technique my friend Charles Kelsey used at Cooks Illustrated. He was working on I think it was an herb turkey recipe. But he was making some kind of herb butter, and he found that scallions in the herb butter actually really intensified sort of the allium and garlic flavor in a way that it doesn't really taste necessarily like there's scallions in there. They just kind of enhance the alliumness of other ingredients in a way that onions and garlic and shallots just didn't do. So I always add some scallions to my herb butters and herb mayos if I want some of that. Sort of allium flavor in them, One of the other nice things about mayo is that it really sort of mitigates burning in marinades. So something like a marinade that has a fair amount of sugar in it, say like a teriyaki marinade. If you were to just slather this chicken with teriyaki sauce and roast it, it would get really, really dark, almost burnt. If you combine it with mayo, on the other hand, whether you do it in the oven or do it on the grill or do it in a skillet, the mayo kind of protects it from burning. So you can get all the flavors of that sauce and still get some nice charring, but none of the sort of really dark burning flavors that you get. All right. Now we're going to take our herb mayo and really get it all around. I have a Band-Aid on this hand, so I'm only going to use my right hand for this one, but you really want to get in there with your fingers and kind of I don't know what this is the equivalent of. This is the equivalent. It's like if you've ever rubbed a chicken with mayo, that's a lot what this is like. And in the words of Kevin Bacon, you haven't lived until you've slathered a raw chicken in mayo or raw turkey in mayo. So that is what we're looking for. We're going to go onto the roasting tray, kind of splay this guy out.
Sunscreen on a Canadian.
Lena, who's over there, just said if you've ever put a sunscreen on a Canadian, that's what this is like. One of the other great advantages of spatchcocking a chicken is that it cooks a lot faster. So you can cook it at a higher temperature, and it'll cook in about 70% of the time that a chicken would normally take to roast. All right, so this, I don't have to worry too much about where it goes. I'm just gonna shove it in, make sure that it goes through the thickest part, but I don't have to land right in the center. It is Bluetooth and Wi-Fi enabled, so it'll connect to the screen here. You can also connect it to your phone, of course, but this will go straight into a 425 degree oven, center rack. I'm gonna cook it, have the alarm go off when it hits 145. So by the time the chicken hits 145, it will continue rising until once we take it out of the oven. We're cooking it really nice and hot, so it should continue rising until it gets to around 150, maybe 155 degrees, which for me is the ideal temperature for chicken once it's done cooking. As long as you're getting it above 140 degrees and you're holding it at that temperature for long enough, you are going to pasteurize it. So you are going to effectively kill the same amount of bacteria as you you would if you get it to instantaneously to 165 degrees. So by the time it hits 140, bacteria are actively dying. By the time it comes out of the oven and rests, you will have about a 7 log reduction in bacteria, which makes it safe to eat in case people are squeamish about 155 degree chicken. Anyhow, we will find out in a few moments how long it's going to take to cook, but I will be back when the chicken is done. All right, I lied. So I'm back. My predictive thermometer is giving me about a 45-minute cook time, and it is generally very accurate. So that gives me 45 minutes to make the sauce for this chicken. So for the sauce for this chicken, we're going to do a real simple chicken jus. So I've got an onion, some celery, and some carrot diced up here, along with that chicken back that I've just chopped up into pieces. Oh, there's a cat at my feet. We're going to put it in there in a pot with just a little bit of oil, some light olive oil. Not light olive oil, but sort of everyday cooking olive oil. And we're just going to let this very lightly brown. I'm not going for like a deep dark brown here. I don't really want too much sweetness to develop in those vegetables. I just want to take some of the raw edge off of them. So I'm going for a really nice light chicken jus that I'm going to also season with the herbs, the same herbs, and some lemon. So I'm just going to let this brown for a couple minutes and stir it every once in a while. And so I'll be back in a few minutes. So we're looking for basically like that. So not super dark brown, just the raw edge taking off a little bit of coloring on there. Okay, so for a nice light chicken jus. I'm going to put my parsley. This is some fresh parsley along with the stems from the ones I picked. My parsley, sage, rosemary, thyme. If I had a bay leaf on me, I would probably use it too, but I don't. And then a couple cups of chicken stock. All right. That's just store-bought chicken stock. So we're going to bring this to a simmer, and we're going to let that simmer basically, bring it up to a boil, turn it down to a bare simmer, and I'm going to let that go basically until the chicken is done, which is going to be in exactly 41 minutes and 45 seconds. All right, so I will see you then. All right, so we are down to our last 26 seconds here, 144 degrees. And as soon as that hits 0, we should be at exactly 145 degrees if our predictive thermometer is predicting accurately, which in my experience it does. And then we'll pop our chicken out. Meanwhile, this is has been simmering down the whole time, and it's getting ready to be strained while the chicken rests. 3, 2, 1, 0. Time's up. Let's see where our chicken is. Oh, look at the color on that, huh? We are at 145 degrees internally on that breast. And our skin looks crispy and delicious. Our herbs have browned. And let's take the temperature of the thigh as well, just to make sure. So if it all went well, then the thighs should be above 170 degrees, 182. So we're good. All right, so now that chicken's going to rest. As it rests, the breast is going to continue rising a little bit in temperature. And meanwhile, we're going to come over and finish making our sauce. I'm going to strain out all the aromatics that we've been simmering and all the chicken parts that we've been simmering. So we're going to have a really nice, tasty chicken stock now. Into that, I'm going to add squeeze of lemon. Okay, we're going to bring this up to a simmer. I'm also going to add just a touch of soy sauce. For me, growing up, we always had soy sauce in our gravy, like our Thanksgiving gravy. This is not quite a gravy because I'm not going to thicken it up the same way I would a gravy, like with a roux. I'm just going to leave it as a nice thin jus. But I find that soy sauce is sort of, I don't know, for me it's a flavor of childhood, but it also really enhances sort of the umami of the sauce. Let's taste how it is. Yum. All right, we'll finish it off with a few pats of butter that we're just going to let simmer down in there and emulsify. So that chicken's going to rest for, I'd say about 10 minutes or so, and then we're going to come back and we're going to carve it and eat. Our chicken has rested. We move it over to a carving board. Look at how nice and brown that is, and we'll see how juicy it is when we cut it in. Maybe it won't be juicy as all. Maybe it will be dry as the Gobi Desert. I don't know how dry the Gobi Desert actually is, but it's a desert, so I assume it's dry. Never been. Maybe the Gobi Desert is moist, like a chicken. All right, carving a chicken. I like to do the legs first. So I hold the legs like this. Just use the tip of a knife here, you know, and kind of just. You don't really have to do much cutting at all. Like it should just kind of come apart pretty easily, just like that, you know. And then if you find the right part of the joint, you should be able to cut right through. Okay, so we got our thighs and our drumsticks. So let's get those onto our plate. You can see how juicy this is, right? I mean, look at that. Look at that. We're dripping. And the herb aroma, which you cannot smell, but trust me, it's intense, like a circus. Jesus Christ. I cut off these little bits off the sides of the breast, and then I just split it right down the middle here. Right through the heel bone. That's a nice sound, huh? And then we're going to split each breast in half again. Shall we see how we did on those breasts now? A lot of people love chicken thighs, and these days thighs are almost as expensive as breasts are, because thighs are very forgiving. You know, thighs and legs are very, very forgiving, so you can overcook them and they're going to be fine. And if you brine a chicken breast also, you know, it can be fine, but as long as you don't overcook a chicken, you know, I prefer chicken breast, to be honest, these days, because I've learned how to cook it properly. And when you have like a fancy thermometer like that, like the predictive thermometer, it's really almost impossible to overcook your chicken. So you end up with breast meat that is extremely juicy and tender. Let's try some. All right, add some parsley. Of course, if you do want this to be, you know, more of a gravy, you can always make yourself a little roux, you know, flour and butter paste, and then whisk this into it. Or you can use something like Wondra flour to thicken it up. You could even use like a cornstarch slurry and thicken it up that way if you prefer. But I find for a dish like this, it's perfectly fine to just have like a kind of loose juice. All right, let's dig in. Now that we're sauced up, I'm going to start with some of this delectable breast meat. Can a man not enjoy his delectable breast meat? It's delectable. Now let me try some of this juicy leg. Lemony, herby, and delicious. You can see how when it came out of the oven, there's very little drippings in the pan. There's some oil that dripped out, some chicken fat that dripped out, but there's very little of the actual herb mixture, whereas if we had done this with butter, all of that would have dropped right down into the pan. All of the herbs end up sticking to the chicken. You can see how nice and brown it got. All that browning is flavor. All those herbs on there are flavor. It's a really delicious way to cook chicken. Mayo in the marinade. I do it with chicken. I do it with turkey. And I think it comes out great. When we're using a thermometer like this, like the Combustion Inc. predictive thermometer, you don't need to brine it because you're going to nail the temperature every time. You also don't need to guess when your dinner's going to be ready. It'll tell you like down to the second when your chicken's going to be done. All right, guys, gals, non-binary pals. See you next time. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. You can find the full article and recipe along with bonus content and my newsletter for free on my Patreon. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel for more videos like this, or my alternate channel, Kenji Lopez Main, for my dining content. And follow me on Instagram at Kenji Lopez-Alt for daily updates. You can also get signed and personalized copies of any of my books. That's The Food Lab, The Walk, or my children's book, Every Night is Pizza Night, shipped from Book Larder here in Seattle. Find the links to all of this, as well as all of the tools I used in today's video, in the description below. Thanks.